Good afternoon, everyone. I'm starting just a minute earlier because I want to say to you, I was telling some students up here, just 10 minutes before a program like this, I always get a little anxious when there are empty seats. And it just comes from my honors program days when I always was looking for students to come in. But I don't know, Furious Flower just brings the students out. And you are a beautiful looking audience. So thank you for coming. I'm Joanne Gabin. I'm the director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the very first reading for the year. We have a really exciting year prepared for you all. And I hope you pick up some flyers that we have back there for you to see what's being offered next semester. But we have the poet Karen Wood coming, Yona Harvey, and a lecturer by the name of Patricia Brooks Bertram. So look for those speakers in the future. But this afternoon, it's my pleasure to welcome Reginald Dwayne Betts to our campus. I am so pleased to have him here. I remember that it was several years ago that I heard of Dwayne Betts. The former executive director of Cave Canem called me one day and she said, I just met the most marvelous man. His name is Dwayne Betts, and you must have him at JMU. And a few years later, I did call him, and I asked him to come and read to the students and the teachers at the Lucille Clifton seminar. And because of family issues, he couldn't come at that particular time. But I'm glad that he's here now. So, he is the author of the memoir, A Question of Freedom, a memoir of learning, survival, and coming of age in prison. Also a collection of poetry called Shahid Reads His Own Poem. In both of these books, he brings us into his inmate experience in prison. Charged as an adult for carjacking when he was just 16 years old. He spent 8 years in prison. To fill this time, he read extensively and found some hero voices in writers like James Baldwin, Etheridge Knight, Walt Whitman, Tony Hoagland, E. Ethelbert Miller, and the list goes on and on. It was in prison that he became Shahid, the witness. And like Langston Hughes, he honed his skills of observation and listening to render his environment in terms that were sometimes harsh, often sad, but always true. Poet Jericho Brown said of Bates, he loves to incriminate his own existence and the world in which he participates. Therefore, he will always have work to do, and he will never be satisfied with how well he does it. In his best work, he taps into this potential and immediately sets a higher goal, end of quote. His poems have appeared in numerous journals and magazines, including Plowshares, Crab Orchard Review, Callaloo, and Poet Lore. Reginald Dwayne Betts has learned how to grow in his life as a writer. He taught poetry at the DC Creative Writing Workshop at the Hart Middle School and in several other schools. He is the national spokesman for the Campaign for Youth Justice and speaks out for juvenile justice reform. In 2012, President Obama named him a member of the Coordinating Council on Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. He is currently living in New Haven, Connecticut, where he is a student in the Yale Law School. He's a devoted family man with 2 beautiful children, Micah, or Makai, I think is the pronunciation, and Miles. Would you please give a hearty JMU welcome to R. Dwayne Betts.
Elephants in the Fall, for Makai and Miles. 1. Makai, Michael, Samir, Betts. November's flame in that year of hard sunsets, winter's plagency and days when my insomnia courted cognac. All our thoughts were beginnings and you became the roundness that grew to a moon above your mother's hips. We waited without a name for your wonder. And 3 days after your birth, twice named you after the uncle you'll never meet. The name's questions. Micah, who resembles God? Michael, who reminds us of who has gone too soon. And we pronounce Micah as we wanted, Makai, because like the kid from Clarkers, we scrape fists and cuffs for the dreams of you. And now, when on most days your body is all blur and bustle, our song is how right we got it. When the light from that moon spilled out of your mother's belly, I tell you, you were smiling then, as if you knew you were the first song that found me worthy. 2. Named 2. Named 2. Miles Thelonious Betts. Named after the trumpet, after the sound that comes from all the hurt and want that leads a man to turn his back on the world. We named you after Monk too, because sometimes you have to stack legends in a single body already big enough for the sound of them. And we imagined that you gave us a different tune, a way to bang keys into each other until our lives filled with unexpected music. I hear you call me daddy in this land where my father's name is sometimes another word for grave, and I pause. It's the song that wants to unravel me. More crow than swan, I've always been so much caged and caged in. And all that changes when we square M. This old riff on a shotgun wedding calls us back. Your mother's hand in mine, and the shotgun is where we aim at the world that threatens. And I scoop you in my arms, and you are calling us again. So thank you guys for coming. It's a bunch of people here. And it's really cool. This is the first time I've been to a college that doesn't require students to come to readings for class credit. And so I'm just amazed that this many people showed up, knowing that you get no reward except hearing my voice.
That's right.
Man, I'm convinced that nobody in this room would pass a lie detector test. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'll read some from the new book that comes out in October. It's called Bastards of the Reagan Era. I'll read some from this. The first poem came from that, and then I'll read some from the memoir and some from the first collection of poems. Shaheed reads his own poem. I'll probably talk in between, and then we'll see if you guys want to ask me some questions or what have you. All right, so this is from the memoir, A Question of Freedom. "30 minutes. 16 years hadn't even done a good job on my voice. It cracked in my head as I tried to explain away the police car driving my 126 pounds to the Fairfax County Jail. Everything near enough for me to touch gleamed with the color of violence. The black of the deputies' holstered guns, the broken leather of the seat I sat on, and the silver of the cuffs that held my hands before me in prayer. When I closed my eyes, I thought about the way the gun felt in my palm. I tried to remember what caliber pistol it was, but couldn't. And I couldn't figure how something that weighed nothing could have me slumped in the back of a car driving me away from my life. My wrist almost slipped through cuffs that held me captive as jailhouse danger swirled red in my head. I want to tell you that I could talk tough, that I was going over every way I knew to say fuck you, but I wasn't. There were titles of movies and books in my head. Shawshank Redemption, American Me, Blood In, Blood Out, the autobiography of Malcolm X, Makes Me Want to Holler, Racehorse. Every movie or book I ever read about prison bled with violence, and I knew the list I was naming could go on forever. Stories of robbery, rape, murder, discrimination, and what it means to not be able to go home. 16 years old and I was headed to a jail cell, adding my name to the toll of black men behind bars. Not even old enough to buy liquor or cigarettes, but I knew I'd be stepping into the county jail in minutes and that my mom's was at home somewhere crying. When I tried to part my hands, I thought about the violence, about how real it is when a cell door closes behind you at night. I thought about needing a knife, because from what I knew, everyone needed a knife. I stared at my shackled feet. I hadn't seen my mom in months and had no idea when I would see her again. I was getting ready to learn what it meant to lock your thoughts inside of yourself and survive in a place governed by violence. A place where violence was a cloud of smoke you learned to breathe in or choked on. Sometimes there's a story that's been written again and again. Sometimes a person finds himself with a story he thinks will be in vogue forever. The story is about redemption, about overcoming. A person finds that story and starts to write it, thinking it will do him some good to tell the world how it really was. That's not this story. This is about silence and how in an 8-year period, I met over a dozen people named Juvenile or Youngin or Shorty. All nicknames to tell the world that they were in prison as young boys, as children. We wore the names like badges of honor because in a way, for some of us, it was all we had to guard us against the fear. And we were guilty. And I was just like everyone else. I thought about the edge of a knife. All right, so I'm gonna skip ahead and I'm gonna skip ahead to when I got sentenced. And I'm gonna read a couple chapters from that. So, and then I'll just fill in the gap. So when I was 16, because I didn't tell you, when I was 16, I carjacked somebody. And me and my boy carjacked somebody. My boy was 15, I was 16. And we carjacked somebody. And person didn't get hurt, like physically. But I'm sure that they were scarred and they probably still fucks with them today, probably. So that's one of those things that I got to wear. But we had carjacked somebody and we got caught the next day. And that's as like most people do and most children do. We confess. It took like 6 minutes. The police put handcuffs on you. They just got finished waving 20 guns at us. You kind of feel like it's a moment to confess, you know. I was Catholic. I was like, yo, I'm done. Anyway, I pled guilty. I was sentenced to prison. I got locked up in Virginia, so I was sentenced to prison in Virginia. And the memoir, it covers the time that I spent in prison. So I spent time in 5 different prisons in Virginia. The first or second super maximum security prison, Red Onion State Prison, I was there. Coffeewood, Southampton. Some of those places have closed, but some of them haven't. And the book sort of covers that time. And so this is after I got locked up, was transferred over to the jail. The book starts with me being transferred from the juvenile facility to the jail because I was tried as an adult. And what that means is, you know, although I was 16, a piece of paperwork changed me into like an 18-year-old, and that meant that I went to circuit court and I faced life because carjacking carries life in Virginia. So this is the moment where I'm in court, and since I pled guilty, I'm at my sentencing hearing, And so the only thing that's left to determine really is how much time I'll do. The forgiveness parade. Does the defense have any witnesses to present to the court? Judge Bach asked from the bench. The courtroom was filled with that beautiful dark wood that you only get when you have a lot of money. Since my guilt was established, confessed to, there were only character witnesses to be called. Before the judge were a few letters from my high school teachers, but what can a teacher say to stack up against menace to society rhetoric of the prosecutor? I hadn't saved anyone's life to balance the one I thought I shattered, and I knew it. My family did too. That's why that character witnessing amounted to one pitiful line that has been echoed so often in courtrooms and sociology classes discussing the fate of black boys that it burned my ears. Each witness walked to the witness stand and told the courtroom that I was a good boy without a father. He hadn't been in my life, so everyone thought it made sense to hang my guilty plea around his neck. My guilty plea in the night of gun was my false talisman. They needed to balance out the menace to society speech the prosecutor gave. I knew this, but my mother was in the audience, her voice stolen by a bout of bronchitis. At least, that's what the doctor said. But I knew a broken heart could make you stop talking. And the forgiveness parade went before the court and begged for my life. After they sat on the stand willing to fall on swords if it could keep me out of jail, the judge asked if I had anything to say. The most important day of my life, and whatever I've written for the past 2 weeks, 2 months, nearly a year, wasn't good enough a minute after I've written it. Penalties and broken illusions. My legs shake because that's what your legs do when you talk to a judge. That's actually true. Like, I've had a chance to talk to judges now as a law student representing other people, and your legs still shake. It's just one of those things. Like, you get in front of a judge and you just start shaking. And they know it too. It's this weird way where, I mean, like, you can see, they smile at you, especially when you're a law student and they know it's the first time that you've been in court representing somebody, and they imagine it's the first time that you've ever been in court. So they smile, be like, it's okay, just take your time. Anyway, my legs shake because that's what your legs do when you talk to a judge. My mouth is ready to open. I haven't really thought about what I'm going to say right now. I can't say what I've written. He doesn't want my life story. It's in a letter that I wrote to him. Behind me, the people want to finally know why I did it. I can imagine my aunt screaming in my ear, "Boy, what the fuck was you thinking about?" But she's not screaming. She's sitting beside my mother, and they're both as silent as a whispered prayer. I knew it was a bad thing to force my mother into this courtroom, bowing her head in prayer for me when there wasn't a thing that could save me from doing time. I could tell the judge that, but this isn't the time to try to rationalize. I could tell the judge, or I should just cry, break down right here. Except I don't have tears. Gotta be stoned. First person in my family to stand before a judge like this, shackled and cuffed, begging for mercy, and this is all I got left right here, this one moment to speak. After this, the judge is going to start talking, reading off words that signal if I leave out the door behind me or the one to my left. I've listened to everyone. My lawyer has given the judge this fancy sentencing memorandum explaining why he could still sentence me as a juvenile, even though the court has pulled a mumbo jumbo that has made my 16-year-old body an 18-year-old man, a 21-year-old man, a 30-year-old man, somebody strong enough and tall enough to stare down this life sentence. But I am not that person. And right now, I have to think that this judge is ready to put his career on the line for me, to look the victim and the prosecutor in the face and say, this boy deserves another chance. Truth is, if I was him, I probably wouldn't. Black boy I ain't seen from nowhere comes in my courtroom confessing to carjacking a man 3 weeks before Christmas? What kind of sympathy is that going to get me? Especially when all the reason I have is this laundry list of family members talking about how I didn't have a father. My mother quiet in the audience, almost invisible. It's news to me that not having a father doomed me from the jump. Your Honor, I have to apologize to the victim. What I did was wrong. I apologize to my family, to my mother, but I have to say, Your Honor, that I didn't do it because I didn't have a father. And after that, everything is blank. My body light and ragged as if I had thrown myself onto the mercy of the court for real, taking back the excuse handed to the court by my family and giving no answer in return. What answer does the court want? Does anyone want? That I just didn't care about the victim. That I thought the crime was something of the moment that wouldn't define the rest of my life. My legs still shake, wobble like a fighter who's ready to fall. Once I told my mother she should be happy that all I did was get suspended from school, suspended for a stink bomb. I told her at least I wasn't like Malcolm X, who had to go to prison to become what he'd become. It's just so funny. Your mouth will get you in trouble. I thought it was funny then, when crime just wasn't in the realm of possibility. But 2 years changed everything. I should have told the judge that. How 2 years, crime went from unfathomable to regular. Not right, but regular. Something in the realm of everyday possibility. Something more real than the college degree I figured I'd get. The judge wants a reason that will make it okay for him to send me home, when the only reason is that some boys are willing to walk further out onto the ice than others. And everyone has their own reasons, but mostly it's just because they're boys and they think they can and are more afraid not to walk out on the ice than to risk falling in the water that will assuredly kill them. I stepped out there once. Just one time is what I tell the judge. The gun in my hand was the first. Never even fired the thing. It was on safety. It doesn't matter though. Words aren't enough, and this courtroom is all of a sudden as tight and claustrophobic as the shackles around my feet. I truly regret what has happened, Your Honor, and hope to one day make amends. In a courtroom, a judge is expected to be many things, and even as a pencil-thin 16-year-old talking to one for the first time, I knew candid wasn't one of them. Yet moments after I spoke, the Chief Justice of the Fairfax Circuit Court of Virginia, the Honorable F. Bruce Bach told me, I don't have any illusions sending you to prison will help you, but you could get something out of it if you want to. Right there, I should have known I could cancel the next few Christmases. Chief Justice Bach sentenced me to the minimum 15 years for carjacking, 5 years for robbery, and a mandatory minimum of 3 years for the use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. When he said that, he said he would suspend 9 of the 15 years for carjacking and run the remaining 6 concurrent with the 5 I had to do for robbery. I still counted 14 years. I didn't know what concurrent meant. The courtroom was stone silent as he read off the years I'd have to do in the state penitentiary. And once he finished talking and the deputies began escorting me back to the holding cell, my auntie screamed. It sounded feral, and although I was shaking myself, I turned to yell, "It's all right. I'm cool." But I wasn't. I couldn't figure out how I'd just gotten 14 years in prison when I wasn't but 16 years old. I had earned my high school diploma a year early, despite the trouble I was in. The teacher told the judge I was college bound. He told us all I was prison bound. When I got to the holding cell, I realized none of those things mattered. It was the gun and the fact that there were no facts that made me appear salvageable to the prosecutor, to the judge, to the victim. He told me to my face prison wasn't going to help me, then sentence every one of my 126 pounds to a cell for 14 years. At least I thought it was 14 years. Until I learned that concurrent meant I served 2 sentences at one time. A legal trick where the system would pretend that I was 2 people for the first 5 years. One, a 16-year-old boy doing 6 years for carjacking. The other, a 16-year-old boy doing 5 years for robbery. The whole time I'd be a stupid-ass young man, is what I thought. Having put myself in a position to get burned by a system that burned black folks on a regular. All right, I'll stop there. So I'll read a few poems out of the new book, and then I'll come back to the first book, and then I'll spin off and see if you have questions, and then keep reading some more. Sorry. I was going to read this really long poem, but because the memoir's here, I decided against it. And you guys look like if I read for like one poem for 30 minutes, that you're all going to run away. So this poem is called For the City That Nearly Broke Me. For the city that nearly broke me. A woman tattoos Malik's name above her breast and talks about the conspiracy to destroy blacks. This is all a fancy way to say someone kirked out, emptied 5 or 6 or 7 shots into a still warm body. No indictment follows Malik's death, follows smoke running from a fired pistol, an old quarrel, crimson against concrete, and the officer's gun still smoking. Someone says the people need to stand up, that the system's a glass house falling on only a few heads. This and a stop stenching ass out of conundrum, and damn all that blood. All those closed eyes imagining Malik's killer forever cawful to a series of cells, and you almost believe them. You do. Except the cognac in your hand is an old habit, a toast of friends buried before the daybreak of their old age. You know the truth of the talking, of the quarrels, and how history lets the blame go blameless for the blood that flows black in the street. You imagine there's a riot going on, and someone is tossing a trash can through Sal's window, calling that revolution. While behind us, cell doors keep clanking closed, and Malik's casket door clanks closed, and the bodies that roll off the block and into the prisons and into the ground keep rolling, and no one will admit that this is the way America strangles itself. Guzzle. Who knows the blues of life in prison? A man handcuffed to life in prison. They know those cells pled his head with fear. Will it make him a wife in prison? Shahid's time far outweighs this secret. Who cares that he has a knife in prison? So this is from the first book. Most of these, I'm just going to read them. Actually, this is from the craziest conversation I ever had. It's probably not true. But I give you the context of how I wrote the poem, right? I came home, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine's mother, and she was like, "Did you ever have sex with a man?" This is like my first day home. This might have been my second day home. And I was like, "Damn, this may really be the only reason that I'm not homophobic." Like, prison is a horrible place, but probably the only thing that it kept me from being is like homophobic and transphobic. So I guess if I weigh the scales, like having PTSD and all that other shit is worth it because I'm not homophobic and transphobic, and I will never do this to somebody. So I like this lady though. So she said, "Did you ever have sex with a man?" I was like, "Damn, no." And I think I paused too much. I think it's like a pause that you're allowed when asked that question, and I exceeded it. And she was like, "Well, how I know you telling the truth?" And I was like, "Damn. Are we gonna have sex tonight?" And anyway, so I wrote this poem. What your mother asked and what I never say. Have you ever had sex with a man? Were you raped, abused in some way? You want details? You want a camera to pan? Have you ever had sex with a man? You want the lens to focus, to span ombre. You wonder if I sashayed. Have you ever had sex with a man? Were you raped, abused in some way? So
They're snapping in here for you.
that means that you could tell your teacher that like you would have came here without having to sign a piece of paper. All right. And me head smile. I was telling this story earlier about how like the one thing that's true in these poems, some of them are just invented, but they're invented sort of like as a sort of amalgamation of a bunch of things that I saw, experienced, and friends saw and experienced. But the one thing I did try to do is like populate it with names of people that I actually knew. And the reason was It was because in my own head, like I knew that the narratives often weren't associated with those names. But if those people ever read the book, they would be like, yo, he used my name, you know. And there's some really interesting and colorful names too. In Meathead Smile. A Missing Day is a story told by God about something worse than 5 young men flexing in fresh white tees. They pose before the commissary and none of them thinks the name Snake or Pooh suggests bars clanking behind them at night. Even Double Barrel started as nothing more than an explanation for Darnell Thomas's refusal to pass the ball. In Meathead Smile, you can't find one of the 54 years bloody hands and a broken street in Richmond left him. Men notice as they rustle together and pull back sleeves to show tattoos smeared by blood and fresh Vaseline. Alright, read a couple more from here. Then see if y'all have questions, and then I'll read some more. Prison. Prison, the sinner's bouquet, house of shredded and torn Dear John letters, upended grave of names, moon black kiss of a pistol's flat side, time blue-born and threaded into a curse, Lazarus of hustlers, the picayune spinning into beatdowns, breath of a thief stilled by fluorescent lights, a system of 40 blocks, empty vials, and handful of purple cranes bills, memories of crates suspended from stairs, tied in knots around street lamps, the hours of unending push-ups, wheelbarrows, and walking 20s, the daughters chasing their father's shadows, sons that upset the wind with their secrets, the paraphrase of fractured, scarred wings flying through smoke, each wild hour of lockdown, hunger time, and a blackened flower. And in fact, I'm gonna read one more and then I'm gonna see if you have questions. Because I'm gonna read the last poem in the book because, well, just because I can. So, what we know of horses. And when my brother says Swan Road is the world, he ignores broken vacants, broken windows, displaces shattered glass. He tells me, believe the world is a tenement house, a pocket full of stones, a world of ghosts, and what's left of ash and smoke after each inhale. I visit now that a prison cell holds his world. Dead men circle every block we know, thread this world with quotes from Psalms. The sorrows of death embrace me. Some trust in chariots and some in horses. They embrace metaphor, disbelieve gravity, breathe in a haunted world. And what of my brother? Running these streets, he was a horse, graceful, destined to be broken. Why admire horses? Why compare everything fast and beautiful to horses? My daddy's generation had a saying for men lost in the world. It was true of my uncle, my cousin, men strung out on horse, chasing a dragon, shivering with the memory of that stallion gone postal in their veins. Called them lost in place, with cities buried inside them, horses inside them stampeding. My brother put his faith in horse, and there's no map to find him now. He tells me he inhales the funk of men doing life in prison and knows he is in hell, that he has dug his grave amongst bricks that embrace him. He, exile, with only rusted iron and bricks bracing his 200 pounds. Who admits this cage embraces him? History is written on the back of the horse broken by the world. We all in prison now. I stare at this man, my kin ruined by embracing night. Call this place a horse collar and watch how it cuts in the skin, how the leather embraces all of our necks. Even as a visitor behind plate glass, I brace myself for cuffs. This, not Swan Road, this burden placed on me, these memories of courtrooms and the places where bodies were found. And still, I want to stop and embrace my brother, to hold him close and pause to inhale the scent of prison, To tell him what I smell, what I inhale, is still the body of a man. How can a man inhale so much violence and not change? I light my Newport, inhale, think on how his voice has changed. My man now a feral horse wearing kick chains, unable to sleep, always on guard, inhaling the air for prey, as if he is still the predator, as if he can inhale death and keep on living. Death, the elephant in this world. I imagine the other men here, all in a world filled with a casket's aftermath. How much grief can you inhale? My brother tells me he prays at night. He wants to leave this place, but we all know his wild hours placed him in this mural of blood. His hunger placed him in C Block, cell 21. It suffocates and nothing replaces time. You okay? I ask. But he's in a place only he knows. When he walks away, he embraces the kind of rage I fear. A man killed a man near him. That man was placed on a gurney and rushed down a sidewalk, dead where no one gives a fuck if you're breathing. To be a horse galloping away is what I want for my brother. He wants horse trundling through his scarred veins. Prison has taken a place of freedom, even in his dreams. And I know this is not a world where none is lonely. And I know he is lost to the world. And I know he still believes this. I shut my eyes and all the world is dead. And I know that there's still a strip, a place that he believes is the world, Swan Road, where he can inhale and be free. Sometimes his cuffs are on my wrists, and I embrace the way they cut, as if I'm the one domesticated, a broken horse.
Beautiful. Just a little bit of housekeeping before he answers your questions. I'm going to give you a minute to think of a question. Those of you who are here for a passport program, right after the end of the program, you can get your passport stamped in the back. Karen Rishmat is back there, and she's ready to stamp your passport. I want to also thank the wonderful staff of Furious Flower for all they do to make these events possible. Elizabeth Hoover, could you wait for us back there? Who's the assistant director of Furious Flower. You just met Karen Rishmat, who is our communication specialist. And Hannah Vaughn back there, our student assistant. And the man who was behind the camera, Andrew Duncan, is back there. So let's give them an applause. You should know that we have a wonderful, beautiful woman back there from the bookstore who will sell books to you after this. And you have the great opportunity to buy a book, and Mr. Betts will sign it for you, won't you?
No, I don't sign books.
You don't sign books? Okay.
No, I was joking.
I was going to say he tells of the verification because he put a lovely, lovely message in my book. Years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, all right. Karen, did I cover everything? All right. All right. One more thing. I want to thank the faculty members who are here and who encourage their students to come. Put your hands up. Let me see who you are. Okay. Erica back there, Kavanaugh, who always supports Furious Flower. And a new faculty member, John Castine, who is here. There. Thank you so much for being here. All right. Now, I'm sure there are at least 20 questions in the group, so I will kind of moderate a little bit. Let me see your hands.
Oh.
Yes, right here.
Hi, I want to say thank you so much for coming. It's really beautiful. But do you have a specific process you like to use when you sit down and write, or do you just kind of write it as it comes?
So she asked if I have a specific process that I like to use when I write, or do I just write it as it comes? I think I do both. You know, it's weird. Before I started writing, I actually thought that writing was something that if you were a writer, it meant that you were a genius. And then I started writing and disabused myself of that notion very quickly. And I discovered more than anything else, right, that writing is the way that you think, and you give yourself time to think. And because you think about it when you talk to somebody, you don't actually get a chance to process out your stupidity, right? And so writing. So I think it's a process. I do it as I go along because I'm often revising things. You know, it's weird when you write poetry. I remember I wrote when you write poetry, you confront parts of yourself that you don't normally have to confront. So you write something, you say, "Damn, I like women more than that poem suggests." You know, and especially it's really weird when you write this poem that is meant to do a certain thing and you find it doing something else, because then you really have to like interrogate your thinking, and it's not just about writing. I'll tell you like one. I probably shouldn't tell you this hard story. I'll tell you one hard story about somebody else, and then I'll tell you one about me. This dude wrote this book. The fuck was wrong with him? Like I was teaching at a place in America, and somebody wrote a poem called literally "Nigger is a book that needs to be burned." So I was thinking first, right? I was like, okay, what direction will this go? And he read the poem, and I was like, damn, I don't know if he knows that he just wrote a lynching poem. I was the only black person in the room at this place somewhere in America. In these moments, you reflect on things. And I was just like, how will we respond to this poem, you know? And then after I responded how I responded, I was forced to have this sort of conversation. I wasn't forced, but I had this conversation with him and the rest of the people there about process being the ability to think about what it is that you said on paper. Because I liked the guy, I knew him. Like we had rode around before, we had drinks. I was like, maybe he's just, what's going on? And he was like, no. What I was saying that racism is this book that I was like, you ain't say that, right? Like we gotta be clear. And so that was the embarrassing thing that happened to him, and really made me, and then I took it as like a quote unquote teachable moment, right? But then something I did, I wrote a poem for a friend of mine, and it was about like love and homosexuality, and I was like, this is good here, and then and it said something that was basically homophobic. After I said that thing in the beginning about not being homophobic, right? It was something that was like immensely and obviously homophobic, right? And I was like talking about love or something that I couldn't engage with it without talking about like pain and death and violence. And he was like, I don't think I love like that, you know what I mean? and then when he had said that, it made me go back to the poem and like really think about the things that I was saying and how it was working and how it was operating in the poem. So I think the answer is like both and, because I do that process within actually trying to work on a poem that I imagine I want to write. But then I also just free write, take notes. If I read something in a book that I think is particularly compelling, I copy it down. Just random things, you know, just a way to have a conversation with myself so that when it's time to write, I hope to have something to say.
Thank you. Yes.
The 15-year-old that assisted you in the carjacking, did he get the same sentence as you, and where is he now?
So assisted me is probably not the word I would use. It sounds so professional, like. But no, that's my man. I'm his son's godfather. He's my youngest son's godfather. I was the best man at his wedding. He was the best man at my wedding. He got an 8-year sentence. We had different judges, so I got a 9-year sentence. He got an 8-year sentence, but he's fine. We both, did our time. Came home. He runs his own business. He does a bunch of reentry work. He actually just got named. So it's cool. You do things that you think make you successful, but it's also great when other people see the things that you're doing and like want to look to you for leadership and guidance and support. And so he just got named a board member of this really respected justice organization called Justice Policy Institute. So that's pretty dope. But yeah, so he's doing good.
Yes.
What inspired you to initiate writing poetry?
I was so this is actually a good story, right? So I was in solitary confinement. I know that's not good. No good story starts when I was in solitary confinement. But no, I was in I was in so first I got locked up and I wanted to be an engineer, and I was really good at math, and I'd taken some extra math classes, and that's how I was able to get my high school diploma before I was sentenced. I was in jail when I got my high school diploma a year early. Like, I'm the only person in U.S. history. I checked on Google. Only person in U.S. history to skip 12th grade to go to prison. It's like amazing. Don't ever tell anybody that though. But what happened is I wanted to be an engineer, and I got locked up, and I was like, that's it. Like, damn, you can't be an engineer in prison. What the hell am I going to do with my life? And I love books already, and I read a lot of books before, and so I was just like, I'm going to be a writer. And I was 16, and I was impulsive, obviously. Like, obviously I was impulsive. And I just said, I'm going to be a writer, And I didn't know what that meant, but I just said, I'll be a writer. So then a year after that, I was in solitary confinement. And the way solitary worked is you couldn't have books. You can have books in solitary depending on the conditions that you went into solitary. But the way that we got more books is we would yell out on the door, "Oh, somebody send me a book." And they had prisoners who worked there as housemen, and they cleaned up and swept the floor. So maybe they would get the book from somebody else and give it to you, or maybe because at that prison the cells were parallel. It was 2 rows parallel and then 2 rows on top. The people on the bottom floor, they say somebody send me a book, and somebody would lay on the floor and they could slide a book from their cell to your cell. And frequently you wouldn't know who slid you the book because you might not know many people back there, and you might not even really see where the book came from. So I asked somebody for a book, and somebody slid The Black Poets under my door, and it's edited by Dudley Randall. And that was my first interest. I had wrote poetry because I had like girls, and I was trying to have sex with them. So I had written poetry in high school, but I hadn't really read poetry. It didn't mean much besides game, right? Or a true representation of my love. But what happened is I opened the book up, and I'm like, Robert Hayden, Etheridge Knight, Sonia Sanchez, and my mind is kind of blown. But what really blew my mind is that Etheridge Knight had went to prison. Etheridge Knight is a black poet. He went to the war, came back strung out on heroin, got in some trouble, whatever. But he went to prison, and he was a writer, and he became a poet. And I think he was a poet. He was kind of he did these toasts before he became a poet, in terms of writing things down. But he wrote about prison, and it was this poem called "For Freckle-Faced Gerald." And I thought I was special, right? Because I was 16 and in prison, and I thought that people didn't go to prison at 16. And this guy wrote this poem in the 70s, and it was called "For Freckle-Faced Gerald," and it was about a 16-year-old kid that went to prison and got raped. And it made me think that poetry was important, not just because of what it said to you, but because of what it documented. Because in that poem, I recognized that the conditions and the things that I was experiencing weren't new. And it kind of helped me pull myself out of my own sort of arrogance and my own ego for a minute. And it made me think that poetry was I want to be him. I wanted to be Hayden. I wanted to be Sonia Sanchez. I wanted to be Lucille Clifton. And so at that moment, I decided to be a poet. And I've always considered myself a poet, because I said I was going to be a writer, but I didn't really know what that meant besides journaling, right? But when I said I was going to be a poet, I had a concrete conception of what that meant. And so that's actually, I could point to the exact moment that I became a poet. And it helps that it's a good story.
Yes, right there.
In what ways were you able to break down the defense mechanisms of boys through your book club?
Let me tell you how the book club started, right? So I'm working at this bookstore. I should tell you, this is a good story too. I came home March 4th, 2005. I'm a poet. So I took all kinds of significance in that. Because I was like, boom, they want me to March 4th into the world, Wasn't true, but whatever, it felt good. So I come home, and my aunt's like, yo, you got to come to this gospel concert with me. I was like, I don't really, because I had to work today, and it's Sunday, and I don't want to do that. And she was like, I was there with you in prison. Like, you weren't, but okay, since you threw that in my face, I'm going to go. And so I go to this event. She's like, yeah, you can meet this owner of the bookstore. You're going to be there. And it's this guy selling books there, and he's just a young dude. So I'm like, I just don't compute that he's the owner. And we were rapping, and he was like, yo, what you read? And I had read basically every book that he was selling. And he's like, dang, he was like, what college did you go to? I was like, I didn't go to college. He's like, oh, where you at school? I was like, look, I just got out of prison. This is April, I came home in March, this is April. So I ended up finding out a dude, his name is Yao Glover. Yeah, bro, Yao. He a poet too. And after I told him I'd been to prison, he said, "Oh, you're a writer?" I was like, "What the fuck is this?" You know, like how do you go from I went to prison to are you a writer, right? If you ever want to do something kind to somebody, then you ask them a question that has legitimacy, regardless of whatever dumb shit they said before you ask them that question. Because him asking me that question changed my whole life in a profound way. I met my wife in that bookstore. I started the book club in that bookstore. The book club led to me being on the front page of the Washington Post, which led to me getting this memoir. All of that hinged on him just asking me, "Are you a writer?" And when I sent him some poems, that let him see how I think. And he was like, "Damn, this dude has read a lot of books. He just got out of prison, which means he had to do some stupid shit, but he's read a lot of books. He obviously is a good thinker. I'm going to offer him a job," right? And he offered me a job, and I was assistant manager of the bookstore, and that became like the platform that sort of propelled me to everything I have. So I owe my man a lot. But anyway, I'm working in a bookstore, right? Woman comes in, she buys a book for herself. I say, "Buy a book for your son." That's what we do. We buy books for black boys. We make their lives better. She said, "No, I'm good." Her son was like 3. It's like the man, he could walk, he could read, you know. So she was like, "No, I'm good." I was like, "Look, I'll give you 10% off." She's like, "No, I'm good." So I'll give you 15% off. She's like, "No, I'm good. And if you say anything else, I'm not going to buy this book." So I'm like, "Damn, all right." So my friend, I called my friend, and I was like, "Yo," and you know, I call and I do what we do, right? I call my friend to talk bad about this lady that I don't know. And I was like, "Man, this woman comes in and this is what's wrong with black people, you know? Like I tried to get her to buy a book for her son and we always mad because people in prison, and look at this shit." My friend got 2 sons, and at the time I didn't have any children, and I didn't really understand things like childcare, diapers, baby food, breast milk, Similac. Like those things were words, but they weren't like concepts, right? So my friend says, "Huh? Maybe she has a library card," right? And she said, "In fact, man, you know, like maybe she bought a book for him yesterday. Maybe she couldn't afford that book. And what the fuck is a 10% discount on a $3 book? You said that." And then she's like, and then beyond that, she was like, "And what are you doing to help black boys read?" So I was like, damn, fuck. Well, I'm starting a book club. I was like, "You want help?" Because you kind of made me feel bad with the shit you just said, you know. And so we started a book club, and I had like a group of 6 to 11-year-olds, and then 12 to 18-year-olds. Now the 6 to 11-year-olds, that was chaos. That was chaos. That was like, I was like, "Look, read the book," and I learned the benefit of a close reading. Because I would say read the book, and it didn't even matter if they read it. They weren't prepared at 7. My son ain't prepared. What the fuck was I thinking about? My son at 7 is not prepared to discuss a whole book, right? Like even now, I'm like, "Let's talk about the book." He was like, "Okay." And then he hones in on one part that he thinks matters, right? And then forgets everything else. And so I learned that with the book club. I would just pick a page and have him read it out loud, and then we would talk about the page, and then we would talk about school, and then we would talk about why they kept running around and weren't listening to me. And one thing was like really cool. This kid was autistic. He comes in, and my wife is an occupational therapist, and so I kind of knew a little bit about autism because at the time she was working at a school preparing to wanting to go and become an OT, right? And so I knew a little bit. And a kid came and they said, why this store got all these books about black people? This kid was 6. I was like, he's a genius, right? And the mom was like, can he? I'll take him with me. I was like, nah. It was a friend of the kid. He was like, I'll take him with me, but I'll do the book. I was like, nah, leave him here. And I learned like he was really smart, but I learned having him there how like one thing books do is build community. You know what I mean? And I learned that even when it's hectic and you couldn't hold their attention, and somebody has a wild brilliance that's different from everybody else, like it's a way to reel it in, because he was sharp and he could have a conversation, but then he knew all of these like scenes from TV shows by heart. Like, what the fuck? How do you know this? Like, this doesn't make sense, right? And he would like keep performing, and it was a task. And I realized everybody was like that though. We all had something that was pulling our attention away from where we wanted to be, and I just learned how to massage it. And with the older kids, we would just talk, man. I would just, we would read the book, bring the book, and again, I would just bring sections and ask questions about sections and just create an open conversation. It was great actually too, and I did it in a middle school with 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders, and it was the same thing. The 6th graders would hit me. We read House on Mango Street, a group of 6th graders. Kid was like, why we gotta read about a girl? I don't wanna read about no girl. They were so mad, But it was the same thing. I mean, I think that everybody has something they want to say. And books, the amazing part about you know, the difference between poetry and fiction in a way is that fiction, in even 100 pages, you got a good million things to discuss. You know, in poetry, it kind of multiplies that way, but it only multiplies that way to the degree that you're able to bring your own experiences and your own life to bear on the text. But fiction, I mean, I could bring like 2 sentences and then we could have a conversation about 30 different things. So, but I like kids. I just had fun, and I didn't have any standards, and I didn't have anybody telling me that it was difficult. You know, and I realized that kids just don't have anybody paying them attention, and so they just appreciated the fact that, you know, I was in there like challenging them, and I was in there accepting that their opinions mattered and that they could challenge me, and it was fun. You know, it was cool.
Just listen to you read your work. It seems like you think a lot about like body, like, you know, the kinesthetic and the tactile. And I was wondering if maybe that's kind of something that you've always thought about, or if that's like from your experience, kind of a focus on human physical.
Yeah, I don't know. I think one, that's a really good question, but two, I mean, I think that's one of those questions that I said something before about the challenge with being a poet, the challenge with being a writer. Like when you were writing in isolation and then you would send your book out into the world, and you didn't really read to the public, or you didn't really read to as many people, you didn't have a chance to confront your text again and again and think about things that it's doing. And so now, because I've been reading from this book for a while, each time I read it, I think about new things. And when I'm confronted with an audience, like, I never thought about that, and nobody's ever asked me that. And so I could bluff an answer, but I would be bluffing the answer. The best way I could say it is that I would be bluffing the answer, man. It's just something that you just gave me something to think about. In fact, you should write. No, I'm not. You should write a dissertation when you get your PhD in English. You should write a dissertation about the various uses of the body and why it's concentrated in some people's texts more than others. And it probably, I mean, honestly, like, if just on the surface, what it has to do with spending 8 years in which I had like very little control over my body, and it created. I read this book one time. I'm like near blind, and so when I went to the jail, I'm like legally blind without contacts on. And so when I was at the jail, I couldn't wear my contacts because the jail is a dirty place. Seriously. And I didn't have glasses because I wanted to be cool when I was 15, 16, so I didn't have glasses. And I wasn't preparing for the possibility of going to prison at that point. So I couldn't see, and the library card would come around and I would want a book, but I couldn't see. And it was this black book one time, right? And I was like, give me that one, right? And it was Shabumi by this cat Trevanian. And it's a part in a book with like the main character. It's like, has anybody read Shabumi or heard of Trevanian? Damn. They don't teach that here? No, they don't teach that anyway. But it's like one of those, the main character was like he ended up becoming like a kind of ninja assassin type person. But what happened is he got put in solitary confinement. He was his mom was like Japanese and his dad was a soldier, and it was about the relation. So that was kind of interesting, the relationship that happened based on the war, because his dad was serving over there. And then he learned Go from like the person was his mentor. But anyway, he ended up spending a lot of time in solitary confinement, and when he came out, he had this like awareness of when somebody was close to him that was really acute based on the amount of time that he spent in isolation. And so I relate that to your question in saying that when you spend a lot of time in which you have no control over your body, if you're a certain kind of thinking, a certain kind of person, and I think you frequently obsessed over that, then it can't help but to come out in your book. And I guess that's what you're telling me, is that it has come out in my book in ways that I hadn't really considered before you asked.
Excellent. Last question, right here.
There's a lot of changes happening in jail systems, with maybe bringing in a gardening system into jails, but with the majority of prisons, it's not that much focused on rehabilitation and more focused on punishment. When you were in prison, did you feel like it was a broken system that did not serve you?
Yeah. No, I mean, well, look, prison is broken in America. I mean, I think that's just one of the, we could just accept that as a fact. And we're at a time now in which they discuss prison as being broken, but it's been broken for a while. But you have to go back. In 1992, the Attorney General of the United States authored a report called "The Case for More Incarceration." That's a profoundly disappointing title, you know. And it says something about, I guess it says something about a lot of things, but it really says something about our approach to problems with the human condition in the United States at that point. And the fact that now, like this morning, so Ta-Nehisi Coates has a story in this issue of the Atlantic that sort of talks about the damage of that incarceration does to families. I haven't finished reading it, but I know that's what it's about. And the New York Times just did a long report on the price and the cost and the impact of incarceration on those who aren't in prison. And it argues that like most of the people, most of the relatives and the family members are under the poverty line, and a lot of it is because incarceration produces an actual cost on the relatives, and we could say that somebody needs to like serve time. We could say that, right? But then the question is, should phone calls, look, right now phone calls at the New Haven jail cost like $1.50 or $2 a minute, right? I could pay $50 a month for all the fucking minutes in the world, right? For $50. But you will pay like $1,000 for, 50 or so minutes in some states, right? Some states, phone calls is $5 a minute, right? So, well, that's not $1,000. So for 60 minutes, you're talking for an hour, you're talking about $300. Some states, right? So that's one issue. You had these profound costs that's being created, and that was commonplace when I was in prison. So the system was definitely broken, even just on a level of the financial impact of incarceration. My mom was able to pay for me to get a paralegal course. And so I'm in law school, and you're like, you're in law school. But I'm in law school because my mom paid for me to get a paralegal course in prison. So when I finally came around to me considering law school, I had an audacity about myself that came from knowing that I wrote a habeas corpus while I was in prison, which wouldn't have happened if my mom didn't have the money to pay for this course. So the system's broken. And when I was in it, wasn't anything else. I mean, I didn't get everything I learned in prison, I learned on my own, and I learned from the men who were incarcerated with me. Like, none of that came from any kind of institutional support. Right now, we're moving towards something else, but the catch is, like, when will society actually think that this is a problem that we should solve? And the hard part about incarceration is, like, I was guilty. I was telling Elizabeth that I was the commencement speaker when I graduated from the University of Maryland. And I graduated roughly 12 years to the date that I was sentenced. And I said 12 years ago to this date, I stood before the Honorable Judge Bach, and he sentenced me to 9 years in prison. And on that day, nobody in the room expected me to make it here. And I was talking about, speaking to the audience and graduating. And that's the reality. The prison system is broken, but it's in part broken because our conception of what change, redemption, and justice should be, right? Because it's kind of absurd that I got 9 years in prison and I had a high school diploma and I never had another charge and never had another run-in with the police before that. And in getting that 9 years in prison, nobody asked like really basic questions like what kind of institution should he go to, right? Should he go to prisons that have college programming, or should he go to prisons that have nothing? So I think it's clear and it's really obvious that prisons are broken. The good news is that it's a lot of organizations now that work on the issue. I think what we need to do is figure out how to make it a part of the public conversation more, because the more people who aren't invested in the work know about it, the more likely that you'll get change. We have more people invested in the work, that's great, but you don't get real change until Vietnam War, everybody had an issue with it. Everybody had an opinion on it, right? Not saying that you got to compare prison to Vietnam, but compare it to a moment in time where like everybody had something to say. Right now, you still had a bunch of people who say, well, you shouldn't have committed a crime, and won't think about all of the collateral consequences. Anyway, long answer. Thank you guys for coming. Had a great time.